Hello plant lovers, it is Matthew in Melbourne welcoming you back to my channel. Thank you very much for finding me. If you're new here, I grow cold, cool, intermediate orchids here in Melbourne, Australia without a greenhouse or grow lights or humidifiers, just me growing these indoors or outdoors or they're out of the pool. So plant lovers, if that sounds like your climate, do hit subscribe. I post every week on a Friday. Asterisk, I'm a complete amateur, so take everything I say with a grain of salt, and of course it's all dependent upon your own environment. And in fact, today is a case in point about how failure can perhaps spur us on to learn more. Yes, plant lovers, yes. This video was going to be a triumphant summation of my ability to grow Phaius and their hybrid cultivars. Instead, this is going to be the video of abject failure, plant lovers, because this is a flower that is no longer attached to its plant for a very good reason. All right, so let me tell you what we're going to be talking about. We are talking about Phaius, Lady Ramona Harris, looking at you, which is a plant that I had longed to find, and I made a video about finding this online. I received it, and I'll show you a little image here of the little flower spike just emerging and how excited I was. And then here we have Phaiocalanthe Kryptonite Parkside, which is, I think it's a primary hybrid. I can't remember. Anyway, it's a hybrid, which I have also made a film about because when I first bought this, I was so excited and it was in spike. Anyway, plant lovers, I have been in the process of making sort of seasonal videos about these, which was going to end today with the triumphance of the flowers of Lady Ramona Harris looking at you. But we hit a snag, otherwise known as a dead plant. So yes, look, my Phaius Lady Ramona Harris looking at you is looking at me because I killed it. Well, there may be a glimmer of hope, but anyway, we'll get to that. All right, so what we might do though is just go back in time when everything was rosy and I was looking forward to a glorious future with my Phaius. And I was just looking at the winter foliage of this beauty just to give you an idea of what it was doing. So it is now the first weeks of spring in Australia, and I made a little bit of a video about the growth of this in midwinter. So let's have a look at that now. All right, plant lovers, a quick Phaiocalanthe Kryptonite Parkside update. It is the first week of winter here in Australia. A cooler season. Let's just say it's been pretty damn cold and miserable and wet here the last week and for the next week. Hey ho. And what this video is going to be part of is sort of an ongoing care video. So I thought I would just show you what it's doing now, which is winter. So what we should be seeing is the leaves dying off, and as you can see, they're still healthy. They've still got a lot of love to give. There are some here that you can see are just beginning to turn at the ends, and this one here. So the leaves should be really dying down now as we're well past autumn and getting into winter. But plant lovers, the really weird thing, and I'll have to lower the plant a bit, is this growth emerged probably about a month ago, which was late autumn. And it's growing and maturing, so isn't that odd anyway? It's a very odd time of year for it to have sent up a new shoot, but still, I am not that worried. I mean, it's going to do what it wants to do. I just hope that it matures in time before the weather really cools down and all these other leaves die off. But anyway, I'll come in and show you that the pseudobulbs that grew this year have grown really fat and very healthy, super amounts of fertilizer in the potting medium, and I've liquid fertilized it a lot throughout the season. This is a real hungry fella. But the most exciting thing is to show you the flower spikes. Now, I was a bit unsure that I'd be able to get this to rebloom because I don't have really bright overhead ambient light in this house. Hopefully in our new one we will. But I have got one flower spike which is doing really well and another little baby one coming out here. So I'm going to come in closely and show you. Okay, can you see the flower spike here? There you go. If I put my finger that way, you can see the flower spike coming out there. And what you can see is that it comes out of the very base of the pseudobulb. But what will give you an even better indication of where it comes from is if I tilt the camera very cunningly. What you might be able to see here is just a little green nub, and that, plant lovers, is another flower spike. So the spike comes out of the base of the mature pseudobulb that has just spent the last year growing and fattening up. The flower spike comes out of there, and you can see perhaps perhaps if we can get the leaves out of the way. There we go. There's our flower spike on this one, and I'll take that leaf away, and then you can see where the flower spike has come out of the bottom there. So it looks like only one spike per bulb. So these are the new bulbs that grew for me this year with lots of food. So I've got one spike per bulb. When I bought the plant though, one of these original older pseudobulbs here did have 2 spikes. So that clearly is possible. So perhaps for me, it's just, who knows, maybe the plant doesn't feel like spiking twice. But it is possible. Maybe more sun, it would do that. I'm just going to turn it around without blinding us all and disappearing behind the undergrowth. But I'm just pulling off some of these old sheaths. It is not an impossible thought that we might get another flower spike popping up from one of these bulbs. Who knows? Anyway, we shall see. So I will come back and visit this plant when the blooms are open, and we'll also be able to just get a sense of what's happening with this new growth, which has happened really when it shouldn't. But anyway, you're very naughty. I just hope it matures in time. But anyway, there we are. 2 flower spikes, and I'm really thrilled because this is a warm to hot grower, and I didn't think I would have much chance. As you can see, it's leaning towards the light. It's at the top of the stairs here. If you watched my grow space video, it's at the top of the stairs. It gets quite beautiful ambient northern light all year, but particularly in winter, it's much more direct and strong. So there we are. Let's check back in a few months. And I can report, as you can see, that really not a lot has changed, except of course the flower spike, but we'll get to that. But look at the leaves. I'm hugging this to me. As you can see, they are still just gently beginning to turn and to die off. There we go. But still looking quite beautiful. The new growth has matured, and it is also starting to just die off a little bit at the ends. And we still have all of these wonderful new growths coming up here, which are really ready for a healthy dose of fertilizer. But anyway, let us put this aside for the minute. Oh, and why don't we step back in time and look at this beauty about a month ago, when its flower spike was at its zenith and the flowers were really gorgeous. And I was so thrilled because I bought this just over a year ago, and I bought it in spike, but this was the first year that I was able to get it to bloom for myself. So let's have a look at that footage. Well, plant lovers, here we are with another Phaius update, and look, yes, needless to say, this little baby is in bloom. Look at that flower spike. But this is year, well, 1, but kind of in its 2nd year, and I got it to rebloom. So I'm really, really excited. Only 1 flower spike, but there might be a second, but we'll get to that. So as you can see, the flower spike is as good as it was last year. We have a huge arcing spike with lots of flowers and buds that open sequentially throughout. Absolutely stunning. The color is gorgeous. No fragrance, not even a skerrick of a smell, but never mind. With this kind of flower, who cares? Now I will show you where I grow it. So as you can see, it's at the top of the landing, and it gets pretty fabulous northern light actually. So that window faces due north, and in the southern hemisphere, of course, that is where the sun comes from. In the northern hemisphere, it will be due south, but in my case, it is a fantastic spot for orchids that want bright light. But as you can see, it is quite clearly growing towards that light. It would be much better if I had overhead light. So that, plant lovers, is also known as a greenhouse, which, as we know, I don't have. So I have to put up with that lean. I guess I could turn the plant every day, but I'm not that kind of guy. Really, the care needs for this were kind of as the instructions were on the packet. Basically, it is a water-loving plant, so you need to keep it moist. That means that in the water tray at the bottom, you always need to see moisture. And in warmer weather, you might actually want to have, a good ½ inch or a centimetre of water in that dish. So you really don't want this to dry out. In winter, I ease that up a bit, but the dish is still moist, but perhaps not sitting actually in water. But nonetheless, it is a water-loving plant, and pretty much feed it whenever there is something going on. So whether the spike is appearing or whether you've got new growths appearing, whatever it might be, this plant is a heavy feeder. So I have been feeding it often. Now it is August in Australia, which is late winter here in the southern hemisphere, and all the early spring bulbs are out, to give you context. Now, as you can see, the leaves of this growth are all starting to brown off, so that is quite normal as it's a deciduous type of orchid. And a lot of people I have read do actually cut off the leaves and just leave the flower spike, and I can kind of understand why, but the leaves aren't that awful as far as I'm concerned, so I'm leaving mine on. But plant lovers, there is a conundrum about this particular plant and its life cycle. So it's supposed to spend a year producing a new growth which matures, and then come winter, well in fact autumn, late autumn, early winter, you'll start to get a flower spike from those newly matured bulbs, and you get your flower in winter as per this one. And then rinse and repeat. In spring you get your new growth appearing, it matures, at the end of the year it flowers, yada yada yada. The old growths drop their leaves, and as you can see here, you then have the old pseudobulbs left behind as the new plant sort of grows around it, and ultimately of course you'll have to divide it to get rid of those dead old back bulbs. Simple enough in theory, is it not? But plant lovers, this bulb emerged only about 2 or 3 months ago. So it emerged at the end of what should have been the growing season, which is very curious. And as you can see, the leaves are very beautiful and healthy, and the bulb isn't quite as mature as the other two that appeared in spring, as they kind of should have done. So I'm a bit confused slash bemused by all this. What I can see right down here, which I will show you on this new growth, is a spike. Now, the flower spikes emerge from the very base of the bulb, whereas the new bulb itself kind of comes from underneath the soil level. Nonetheless, it's a little tricky at this early stage to say whether this is in fact spring growth or whether in fact it is a flower spike. So I don't know, the seasonality of this plant seems to be all over the place in my conditions, but it's a good lesson, because with orchids that have a very specific season, you've kind of just got to observe them and go with it. So if they're doing things that are counter-seasonal, you have to do things that are counter-seasonal too, which might mean watering or it might mean feeding. So this one, while it's doing things, while it's either producing growths or flower spikes, etc., it needs watering, needs feeding. So I'm not going to sort of stop any of that until it tells me not to. But anyway, so this flower spike emerged from one new bulb, and then I had another new bulb which didn't produce a flower spike, but it does have this spike growing out here. And I will come in and show you that clearly, but you can just see that there. And I'm just not sure if that is destined to be a flower spike. Now, it very much is coming from the base of the bulb, so I imagine it probably is. So there you go. I think we can assume that Phaiocalanthe Kryptonite Parkside is doing well in my care, and the last thing we need to do is really just snip off with our sterilized and super clean, wonderful Japanese secateurs the dead flower spike. And I will just come in and show you, as you can see, the flower spike comes from the base of the pseudobulb down here, and we're just going to trim that out as close to the base as possible, and there we go. One dead flower spike. Very happy with that though. So in the end, the second spike I saw emerging wasn't a flower spike, it was actually a new growth. So the next stage in the life of this plant is that it needs repotting. So these things put on a huge amount of growth every year, and they need, oh, I've just spotted another new growth, goodness me. And they need a lot of food. So I've read that they really perform well when you repot them every year and refresh the potting medium. So I'll make a separate video about repotting it, because it is a little different to anything else that or is it? Yes, it is. It is quite different to anything else I repot. So we might just have a look at that specifically on its own. But anyway, so Phaiocalanthe Kryptonite Parkside is doing well. It is sitting in a moistish dish constantly. So it is essentially sitting in moisture with its roots wet, which is what this one seems to like, but may have led me to disaster with what I thought was a very similar cousin, Lady Ramona Harris. Looking at you. Okay, so let's look at this plant now. So this was going to be the update bit where I was going to show you this healthy plant, show you the glorious flower spike doing its thing. I was going to bask in my glory. Well, no, this is a learning opportunity, plant lovers. And I'm really keen, I'm going to prefix all of this by saying, as you know, I'm a complete amateur. I find my way trying to figure out what works. Well, I figured out what doesn't work for this. But I do want to know from you what does. So I'll get into what's happened to me, but anyone who does grow Phaius, Lady Ramona Harris, looking at you, I'd love to know what your tips and tricks are for making it thrive. So what I essentially think is I got this wrong. Now, it was happily doing its thing where in a similar position to this one, but in a bit more shade, because this is a shade-loving plant. It's more of an understory plant, whereas Phaiocalanthe Kryptonite Parkside can take much brighter indirect light. So it was in the right kind of shady spot. But perhaps what I misunderstood and miscalculated was the fact that this is not necessarily an ancestral boggy orchid that likes its roots wet. So I kind of thought it did. So I was giving this the same treatment as that, which means it was always sitting in a moist dish. There was always moisture and the soil never dried out. And what that has resulted in, perhaps as you can see, is squishy, rotten bulbs. And the new growths have all failed and just dropped off. So essentially what's happened is it's rotted. And I only realized this when I was looking at the flower spike, and then I noticed that the first sort of 4 or 5 buds just blasted and withered and died and didn't open. And I thought, that's odd, but maybe it's just a quirk. As you do, you always think blindly of the best. Anyway, the next morning I came and some of the flower buds had actually opened and were looking healthy. And again, I thought, there you go. The next morning I came out to look at it, and this was the flower spike, and it had literally just rotted and was flopping down like that, and my heart sank. So I chopped off the flower. They are supposed to last a long time, but on the plant. So I have no idea how long it's going to last as a cut flower, or whether any of those buds will actually open. But so far so good. But you can see how beautiful the flower color is, and it's quite different to Phaiocalanthe Kryptonite Parkside, which is a real sort of rich burgundy red. This one has more sort of pinks and almost lilacs in the petals there, and the back is really such a beautiful color too, quite pale. Anyway, we'll never know, plant lovers, because that is a dead flower spike. But anyway, so I've kind of read mixed reviews about exactly what this likes moisture-wise, which is why I want you, if you grow it, to let me know definitively what do you do. So next time I get this, if I can get it, because it's quite hard to find in Australia, I am going to keep it as I keep, what would be a good comparison? But anyway, I'm going to water it, a house plant. I will water it, allow it to dry-ish before I water it again, but it won't be sitting in water and it won't be wet to the touch at the top, which this really is, and clearly doesn't want to be. Now, the only green shoot, if you pardon the pun, in this whole Surrey saga is that there is, can you just see that there? There is a little shoot at the bottom. Now the problem is though that this bulb is squishy, so it's dead. Does that shoot have enough life force? Could it possibly develop its own root system and save the plant? I don't know, but so what I'm doing now with this is I've just simply put it outside, not going to water it, it's in a sheltered spot, and we'll just see if that can revive. So our cold nighttime minimums have sort of moved on. We're into spring, so the ambient temperature is warmer. The nights aren't so cold. And we'll see how we go. We'll see if that little shoot does become a revived plant. I kind of doubt it, but anyway. So plant lovers, this was going to be a triumphal video with all those past bits for you to look at and go, oh, how wonderful, what a success, but no, what a failure. But I guess that's the point, isn't it? And this is why I started this channel, because it's so hard to find information. I failed, but I am forever hopeful that I can find another plant. They're not easy to find, but I found one. I'm sure another one will turn up, so I can give it a second go and see if I can make it survive and flower. Anyway, I don't like killing plants. It's awful, isn't it? It's such a sad feeling, particularly when I searched high and low to find it. But hey ho, hopefully the cut flower will last, and it will, no fragrance, and it will remind me of my duty to try and find another one and grow it better. Anyway, plant lovers, that is me. This is my story of failure and disappointment. I hope you can give me some insights below if you do grow. Phaius, Lady Ramona Harris looking at you. As I pointed out, couldn't find who Lady Ramona Harris was. She must have been someone to be immortalized in this plant name, but we don't know. Anyway, enough rambling. That's me. Thank you very much for watching. I do post every week on a Friday, as you can see, often failing in my amateur struggles to grow cold, cool, intermediate orchids here in Melbourne, Australia. Oh, FYI, I was keeping this indoors all the time because it's not particularly cold or cool, so it wasn't actually outside like everything else. Anyway, but that is usually my bag that I grow cold, cool, intermediate orchids. So if you're interested in that, do hit subscribe. I post every week on a Friday. So plant lovers, looking forward to your insights on this one, and I look forward to seeing you next week.